4 kinds of people. In my discussions with people about financial planning, I noticed that they seem to fall into one of 4 groups. These groups describe attitudes, not the amount of money they have. For instance, some people are buried in debt. I know people who make $30,000 and fall into this category. But I also know people who make $1 million but spend $1.3 million each year. Before long, being short $300,000 will catch up to you. The amount of money isn't the determining factor. Instead, the attitude about life and money determines which kind of person we are. Here are the 4 kinds of people. Buried in debt. Rick and Janice are both professionals in their 50s. He owns his own business and she is an attorney. Together, they make over $250,000 a year. But they can't seem to make ends meet. Janice called me and scheduled an appointment. When they arrived at my office, the tension between them hung in the room like a storm cloud. They blamed each other for their predicament, and they were furious. I asked them some questions about their goals and dreams, but all they could think about was getting their debts paid off. That's a good start for people in their financial condition, so I asked them to show me the worksheet of their assets and liabilities so we could create a workable financial plan. It was like pulling teeth. They had a hard time even thinking of what they owned and what they owed, so I methodically asked questions to uncover the facts. In recent years, they had avoided this analysis like the plague because it was so painful to look at reality. It took a couple of sessions just to get most of the information we needed. But when we hit critical mass, and I realized I wasn't going to get any more from them, we started working on their plan. Almost immediately, Rick told me that his car was old and he needed a new one. We talked about the reality of the numbers on the balance sheet we had been working on, and I suggested that he buy a good used car. That, he assured me, was out of the question. I have an image to keep up, he insisted. I need a brand new car. Maybe a Lexus. As soon as he said the word Lexus, Janice blew up. She stood up and yelled, "There you go again! All you care about is your image, but you don't realize how you're ruining our lives." She started walking out, and then she turned to me and said, "Jim, if you can't fix this, I'm going to file for divorce." Some people have created their financial problems by their own poor choices, but others are buried in debt because they face difficulties that are beyond their control. I have a friend who was making about $40,000 a year and living modestly, but comfortably with his wife and 2 children. He's a very responsible provider for his family, and he was slowly and steadily building his retirement fund. His wife got pregnant with twins, and he began making adjustments to make sure he had enough money for the delivery and the first years of the children's lives. But as the delivery date approached, the doctor told them there were complications. One of the twins had a heart defect and may not live to term. A month later, the children were born prematurely. One was healthy, but the other had severe heart problems. She was rushed to pediatric ICU, and surgery was scheduled as soon as possible. 2 weeks after the surgery, the little girl died. The $500,000 bill the hospital sent them compounded the family's sadness. Through many negotiations, the hospital agreed to accept a fraction of the bill, but even the lower amount swamped the grieving parents. It took years, but they finally paid off these bills. Many of those who are buried in debt, however, are like Rick and Janice, who have a Santa Claus mentality. For some reason, they believe that somebody, somewhere will magically come through for them whenever they have a need. They have convinced themselves that they are going to win the lottery, that their boss will give them a huge bonus, or that Aunt Phoebe will die and leave all of her estate to them instead of her own children. With that assurance, they keep spending money like there's no tomorrow. A friend of mine has observed people like this, and he says that they get a kind of high from spending. The euphoria they experience from buying new stuff fuels their desire to do it again and again. But like an addiction, no matter how much they get, it's never enough. Most people who are buried in debt suffer under atrocious credit card interest rates. In a letter to a personal finance columnist, a man admitted he owed $12,000 in unsecured debt, and he was paying 29.99%. He said that he always tried to pay a little more than the minimum, but the balance never goes down. The writer responded with the discouraging news that at his current rate of payments, it would take more than 30 years to pay off his debt, if he didn't buy anything else in those 30 years. From the article Dazed and in Debt in the Credit Card Maze by Joe Lee and Thomas Parrish, The Houston Chronicle, January 21, 2007. A generation ago, bank deregulation set off a race to sign up as many customers as possible, with the limits on interest rates significantly raised. Not surprisingly, many customers enjoyed the easy money credit cards afford, but they were shocked to find that the initial reasonable interest rate skyrocketed when they were late with a payment. Getting those rates reduced is almost impossible. If they had read the fine print, they'd know that the credit card companies would charge these exorbitant rates. Banks thrive on borrowers who are up to their eyeballs in credit card debt, but they make far less on the rest of us. In their article on this personal financial crisis, Joe Lee and Thomas Parrish explain, in today's strange alternative universe of credit card banks, the term deadbeat refers not to the improvident borrower, but to the solid citizen who prides himself on paying off his balance every month. What these lenders seek are revolvers, who are likely to pay little more than the monthly minimum, and who eventually find themselves enthralled to mushrooming interest payments, abundantly garnished with late fees. We need to realize that banks' ads may be attractive, but they don't have our best interests at heart. Their corporate commitment to their shareholders is to make as much money as possible. They offer tantalizing promises of low interest rates to hook people, and then they hope those people will miss payments so the bank can raise their rates. And it's perfectly legal. For people who are buried in debt, thinking patterns tend to the extremes. Many, like Rick and Janice, refuse to even think about the negative consequences of their choices. They just drift along month to month, hoping nobody will notice their mounting pile of unpaid bills. But then, when the collection agency sends a demand letter, panic replaces denial. For weeks or months, their minds are consumed day and night with fearful nightmares about a bleak future, alternating with hopeful daydreams about magically getting bailed out. I hear Aunt Phoebe isn't feeling too well.